Welcome to Africa Ascending, a podcast series looking at key issues affecting the African business environment, and more particularly its impact on the insurance sector in Africa. Hosted by Afro-Asian Insurance Services and Africa Ahead, in this series we will be looking at everything from water regulations, currency devaluation, and climate change. To access this podcast in other ways, we will be appearing on Africa Ahead at www.afapublishing.com, Spotify, and on the media page of afroasian-insurance.com. My name is Liz Booth, and I am Editorial Director at Africa Ahead. With me, I have
Uday Patel, CEO of Afro-Asian Insurance Services Limited.
Today, we are talking about the narrative around ESG, or environment, social governance, and how that has changed in the past decade, alongside what we might look forward to in the next 10 years. Leading our discussions today, we have Hope Murera, Managing Director and CEO of ZEPRI. Hope is a fierce advocate of closing the protection gap, particularly for at-risk communities across Africa and beyond. Her guiding principle is, there is no financial inclusion without insurance. Hope chairs the ACRE Africa Board, serves as Vice Chair on the African Trade and Investment Development Insurance Board, and is a board member for the Global Give Back Circle. We also have with us Iara De Sousa, a seasoned insurance professional with more than a decade of experience. She dedicated her career to transforming the African insurance sector through her drive to develop innovative insurance solutions, while advocating for ESG and inclusive insurance practices. She holds a master's degree in civil engineering and is a chartered insurer. So welcome to you both. Uday, would you like to pose the first question for us?
Thank you, Liz. If I may start off by posing this question to Hope Murera, please. When were you first aware of the term ESG? And how quickly did it become part of everyday language within your business from that time?
Thank you, Dai, and I'm very happy to be part of this. Thank you, Liz. Definitely, when you think about ESG, you think about the UN Sustainability Goals, right? And that is 2016, and the Paris Agenda for 2015, when really this became more mainstream. But as ZEPRI, we have engaged in one or the other with the goals right from 2011, when we started engaging partners, shareholders like DEG and IFC, who became partners of ZEPRI, as well as African Development Bank. So this was around 2010, 2011. And the conversations we're having then were around some of the issues, mainly on the environmental areas, looking at the risks we underwrite, tobacco. We had to make some commitments. So I would say some of these things went back, not at the same level that we've seen, of course. The insurance industry has been slower, if you think about the other financial services, but I think we are getting there, and mainly because of climate change. If you think about, Uday, the kind of risks we are seeing now with the severity and the frequency that we are seeing, then the insurance industry definitely is much more concerned. Okay? So one other thing that, if I could say in this, that we see as a conversation to be had around ESG, even as we integrate this into our businesses, is the sensitivity around how do we balance out on the continent the needs, the social, the S in the ESG, the social needs, where we're talking about access to food, access to healthcare, where we're talking about infrastructure, education. So it is a balancing act that we keep seeing, and we keep having this conversation. And companies need to find that balance. And I believe that is a conversation that is coming every day. So if I talk about the fossil fuels, which is one of the highest, how do we make sure that it is not denying Africa the energy facilities, the infrastructure that is required? When we talk about tobacco, how is it impacting employment? Knowing very well that Africa is highly impacted by the environmental crisis.
we all around this forum, we know that the agenda of politicians and agenda of businesses can sometimes be diverse. Do you think where ESG is concerned, those agendas are coming together, are being more aligned, or is that some way in the future?
That is very true, that specifically in Eastern Africa. We've had those issues in Tanzania. We've had issues right now over the East African pipeline. And I don't believe that the agendas are aligned yet. But they have to be, right? They have to be, because at the end of the day is figuring out what is that balance that allows the developing countries to do certain things in a sustainable manner. So I would say it is still early days. In most of these areas, we've seen infrastructure, just even in Kenya, where the roads are passing in national parks. So there is still a divergence, but because there is a stronger global voice, barring what we're hearing from the United States, of course, and because countries are highly supported by development partners, I think this is a conversation that is going on well. In DRIVE, for example, the project we run for the governments of the Horn of Africa, this is forefront, and this is something that the governments have signed on. So in some instances, yes. In some other areas, it's a conversation to be had, where we are looking at the holistic ESG. Yeah.
I wonder if we could bring Iara in here, Uday, because I think Iara, you work with the UNPSI, you're the Africa representative. I mean, how do you see that mix between government and insurance?
Okay. Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Uday. So firstly, what I would say is that based in the principles that we currently have, there is a need to match the goals and the initiatives that we have across the government and the private sector when it comes to the integration of ESGs. Of course, there is a long way to go, because first we need to understand that for the African insurance industry, ESG is not yet there. As Hope well said, it is a slow journey. And one of the main reasons why the journey remains slow in our context is the fact that ESG first appeared as a technical term or something just coming from global partners. So it is a process where we need to disconnect all the bias that the industry has when it comes to ESG, and try to talk more about resilience. And we touch on business resilience, country resilience. We know exactly that both governments, private sector, NGOs, regulators will be aligned, because it is where we are trying to move. So I really believe that one of the huge things that we need to do is simplify the way that we deliver the message, and try to make sure that across the value chain, everyone understands that we are now talking about building resilience and forgetting all the complexity about ESG and all other frameworks that are out there. Let's build a resilient continent.
That sounds music to my ears. I was editing a sentence the other day, and it had no less than 7 acronyms in a sentence of 20 words. And I think that does daunt people somewhat when we get all these initials. Yeah. I'm just wondering, whether it's something that people still see as a bit of a grudge thing. I don't know whether you see that, Iara, and whether you see it from your perspective, Hope, as well. Do people still resent having to make change?
So basically, in the early days, for many insurance, ESG felt like something just expected to do, and just something being imposed by investors' pressure, donor agreements, or anything else. But now I feel like the industry is starting to shift the mindset. So at first, there was a resistance, but now ESG is seen as a solution for all the challenge that the continent is currently facing. And the climate events are becoming more frequent. The insurers are facing growing losses and harder decisions. So ESG becomes more practical. It helps identify risks earlier, engage with communities, and build products that actually reflect local needs. So although it started in a wrong foot, I can see now more insurers embracing ESG, and not because they have to, but because they see the business case of it. And it's now helping them serve new markets, avoid long-term losses, and improve their reputation. From the event that we hosted last week, we could see the interest of the industry. We could see that they are seeing solutions for problems that they were facing in their books, in their portfolios, and their bottom lines that they were not able to provide solutions. And now that they are seeing the light of the day.
Right.
Thank you.
I do agree with Iara, but I think still as an industry, it's seen as a function. ESG is a function, it's a department. There are people who are in charge of ESG, as opposed to an embedding into the processes and into the culture, as well as, the underwriting policies, for example, and across the whole risk framework of the organization. I think we've come a long way. There's still ways to go. And the more we expose people to what this means, it is true that, unfortunately, as we're seeing more losses to the industry from climate risks, then people do open up their eyes more. But a lot of training needs to be done. And, the UN FPI is doing a very good job. I know the Zephyr Academy has also been training on ESG. So, yeah, I think we still have a long way to go, but people are now accepting that and positive to that, as a positive as opposed to the compliance. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just butt in here, Iara and Hope, and just ask you a pointed question in that in Africa, where the business sector is concerned, and all businesses have a duty to deliver a reasonable return to their shareholders and their stakeholders. Now, bearing in mind that ESG is effectively an added investment that didn't exist a decade ago for companies, are we in Africa as companies probably trying to do more than the Western world, who actually coined this phrase? Because I don't see in my backyard all the companies taking ESG on board. Maybe some comments from you.
Uday, that's quite interesting, and it's been seen as a cost, right, to some extent, right? And also, like Iara said, when it is something that feels to have come from foreign areas and imposed on us, that is how it was viewed for the last decade. But honestly, I feel that it is something that companies are embracing as a solution, not a cost, because we're paying claims around that. So limiting that, getting data. I think part of the ESG is also that we're not talking about is about data, right? Having the right data to mitigate some of these risks. And we'll need a little more. We'll need more modeling around risks and how predictive modeling and all that. As we get more comfortable with that, I think companies will embrace that more. So yes and no. To a big extent, that has been seen that way because you had to set up a department, you had to do some systems, you had to put in place policies, and in some cases, like us, you had to let go of some business. But at the end of the day, limiting the business you write in some of those areas does, at the end of the day, equal to good business results.
In reality, many African insurers are already doing ESG work, even if they don't call it that. For example, if we go back to the triple role of the insurance industry as risk carriers and risk managers, companies are already designing products for smallholder farmers. They are supporting recovery after floods, after droughts, and improving governance structures. These are all ESG actions. I can see from discussions with the market that there are companies already ahead when it comes to ESG actions, but they just don't frame it as ESG. They're just trying to find the best ways to manage the risk that they have and the best way to serve the clients that they have. So it is just a matter of putting it in a framework, but they already have ESG actions in their daily operations.
That's very, very, very correct. Was talking about this and went back to 2000s and something, and ZEPRI was already involved in the board I sit on, the Global Give Back Circle. It is essentially supporting at-risk girls with education, with mentorship. Right, we have been involved in smallholder farmers for much longer. We have been involved in many other CSR projects. So there is a lot that has been done, but that was not called ESG. But what is also interesting is that companies that have taken governance seriously, even the private sector in the past, have also been the ones that adopted the now mainstream ESG even faster. So to some extent, the well-governed insurance companies or in the insurance sector did adopt the ESG principles even as they came on board. But totally, there's a lot that is being done and is called something else. And I was looking back at ZEPRI and saying, totally, we've also been doing that, and maybe it wasn't called ESG.
I think that's very true, because in speaking to other people as well, what I hear is sometimes, for example, when they look to sign up to the UNPSI, they expect huge complication, and then they realize that actually they've done a lot of it, done a lot of the work, and are doing a lot of the projects. So it's much easier than they realize. That's encouraging to hear that. I'm just wondering, you mentioned the US. I'm just wondering, do we fear that what's happening in the US might stall the progress that's been made?
Yes, there is fear, and I think it is genuine fear, right? But I also believe that the good always prevails, right? So it might slow us down, but I don't think it can change the fact that we are having worse droughts than ever, that we are having floods every year, that the cat risks on the continent. We used to say Africa is cat-free, right? Not that anymore. So the reality on the ground speaks very loud. And I think people are trying to integrate what does the US position mean. And I believe the rest of the world will go on, and the US also will come back. We just came out of a meeting around what is the impact of funding, for example, on some of these risks, the IDF funding from the World Bank. We do not know yet, but we remain positive that the good that has been made can't be unmet. But that is what I want to think about.
Iara, would you agree with that? Do you think it's unstoppable?
I'll just add a bit. The crisis that we are now facing is real across the global south. And it will just emphasize one thing that we've been talking about, collaboration. It will call for local collaboration because we are facing the same challenges. We will start as a continent to try to build solutions inside the continent and from collaborations from the continent. I think it will be a great opportunity to build a strong industry and build the collaboration and partnerships that will long last, because we all understand what we are facing. We all know the impact that the climate change has in our books, regardless of the intervention of outside forces. So it is our moment to make sure that we agree with what we are facing and we are willing to move forward. And of course, as Hope said, they will eventually come back to the agenda. But we keep moving because we are really feeling it in our books and in our daily lives as a society.
Absolutely. So that leads us very neatly on to the question of what next. What do we expect in the next 5 to maybe 10 years is a better time frame to look ahead? Do we see lots of change?
Right. I mean, not even 5 years. I mean, right now, as an industry, we are still behind, especially on the sustainability reporting. As you know, we published our first sustainability report last year. So as regulatory conditions catch on, I think companies will be forced to get here faster than later. But I think as far as understanding is concerned, there is still ways to go in understanding that actually it is positive and not a negative. It is not a cost. Okay. So I think 5 years is even a long time. I'm looking at regulatory changes happening faster. I know that the global regulatory body is working on this. At the IDF, ZEPRI members, this is an area that we are working with the regulatory body to see how do we make sure that the ESG regulatory framework does permeate across the world in insurance reporting. At ZEPRI, we've made a conscious choice to lead, and that's why we've done things well before it is required. But I see a lot of commitment. I mean, our 30th anniversary commitment was to plant 30,000 trees, and we are doing it across. And when we do it, we're bringing in regulators, governments, and everybody is really onto that. You've seen all governments commit to, I think Kenya is 1 billion trees, right? So it's a language that is coming through. It may not sound, or be structured as ESG, but it is happening sooner. But like I did say, the challenge remains. The big question remains, Liz, how do companies find that balance, right? Between existing sectors that are not necessarily ESG compliant, but at the same time, we do not deprive people of livelihoods and jobs, okay? I did talk about fossil fuels, but there are quite many. If even when you think about generation of electricity, and as we've seen in the region, sometimes it does go against the environmental factors, even if it's a renewable energy. Tobacco farming in some markets, in some countries, it is a livelihood. So the S is stronger. And so continuously, I think to get a buy-in is to make sure that we are always looking at environmental, the social, the governance together. Sometimes I think there is a kind of a mismatch around that. And that will bring the support that we need from everybody. Things that affect the common man, cooking, using charcoal to cook. So what is the alternative, right? Has there been heavy investment to make sure that these people have access to better cooking methods? Or we are telling them don't cut trees, but it's a difference between using trees, firewood, and hunger. So you see, it doesn't become. So where we sit as ZEPRI, we find that we're in a good place because we are a public-private partnership, if you think about that, and there's progress faster than maybe we thought. Yeah. But we need to address this question that I genuinely.
Fantastic. Iara, can I give you one final word on this? What's your prediction for the next 5 to 10 years? How do you see it going?
Okay, so I think we are going to see some big and important shifts. So ESG will become more than a report or a session in a strategic document. It will become part of the insurance industry works at every level. So first, ESG will be built into the ways products are designed. That means thinking about who is being left out of insurance and creating products that work for them, special women, informal workers, low-income communities. And then second, I see a stronger focus on climate adaptation and risk prevention. So right now, a lot of the focus is on responding after disaster, paying claims or helping people rebuild. But going forward, insurers will need to work more on helping people prepare before disaster strikes. That's where ESG really becomes powerful, helping reducing risk before it turns into a loss. And finally, I believe that, as I said before, the African industry can lead on creating new and innovative solutions, because the challenge we face here, from climate change to social inequality, are so urgent, and we are in a position to come up with creative and homegrown answers. If we think about the natural-based insurance, flexible microinsurance products, and partnership with communities and governments. But to get there, we will need more investment in local skills, data, and tools. And we will need to build more trust across the system. So ESG can just be about reporting, and it needs to be about impact. That's the way I see the future.
These, in addition to what Iara is saying, the big thing that is happening that I wanted to talk about last is the microinsurance, right? When you think about the growth of microinsurance, and most companies see that as their growth area, they are investing in digital capabilities to reach the last mile. I think that is ESG, right? That is, getting the social bit out, and that is better agricultural methods that are coming through, because we've also seen research has shown us and data that when smallholder farmers have insurance, they actually adopt better methods of agriculture. They access better inputs, and productivity is higher. So these things are all related, and we must be able to put the language into better ESG adaptability equals higher productivity, so that it gets into the local language of everybody. And of course, AI and what we did talk about, satellite data predictive modeling, will allow us as an industry to do better products, to do better pricing, and to be able to, move parametric insurance to the next level.
Thank you very much indeed to both of you. Uday, I think I will hand over to you, if I may, just to say thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Hope and Iara, for your contribution. And thank you to our wider audience for joining us today. Remember, at Africa Ascending, we ask the awkward question in the hope of finding future solutions. Join us in our future podcasts, asking many more awkward questions. Thank you for joining us.